This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
On to bigger things here. Mike Vrabel, Josh McDaniels, Robert Kraft. We talked about this last week about a possible arranged marriage. I've pushed back on this over the last several days. It's been all over the place. Multiple radio shows have talked about it. It's found its way into social media. I have not once thought that this was some kind of arranged marriage, and I described why I thought that, and last week on our podcast as to what my thought process was. But since we did the last pod, Greg, as you said, you've talked to a lot of people, you've done a lot of reporting. What have you learned as far as Vrabel say hiring McDaniels and whether or not ownership was involved?
So as far as the ownership angle, as far as the ownership angle, that was uniformly shot down to me. And not one of my conversations was the name Kraft, owners, anything brought up to me. Now, we all know the Krafts think a lot of Josh. They know that he's done good work here, but that has not come up. Doing a little bit more probing as far as the relationship between Vrabel and McDaniels, I was told from multiple sources that they talked multiple times over the course of this last season. Nothing specific. Like, they couldn't really dial anything down. Like, hey, if I go to X, Y, or Z, like, I want you with me. I think mostly because they didn't know what the landscape was going to be at the end of the day. I don't think for a long time, probably right up until Mayo was fired, I don't think either of them thought that New England was a legit possibility. And with McDaniels, there's, he's at the point of his career. He's got another 3 years left that the Raiders are paying him on a very hefty contract. There's a lot of family considerations for him. Like, he was going to be in the mix for between 5 and 7 sort of offensive coordinator openings around the league. And, they just didn't know how things were going to shake out. I mean, I think if you ask McDaniels, and I'm sure, when he talks to the media, I'm sure he's going to, be very thankful and appreciative that it worked out the way that he did, because he still lives locally. His kids are in school here, all that stuff. But Vrabel, as far as, there's also been a lot of talk about, like, if Vrabel went to Chicago, would McDaniels have been his offensive coordinator? From what I understand, the answer is yes. I think Arthur Smith was number 1 on Mike's list, but that wasn't really reality. He's under contract with the Steelers. Unless things went really south for Arthur with the Steelers, he was going to be there. There was no way for Vrabel to get him. The Tommy Rees name did not really come up. I mean, I think Vrabel thinks a lot of him, would have loved to have had him, possibly as like a QB's coach, but I think McDaniels has always sort of been the guy for Vrabel, from what I understand from talking to people. And I think the reasons for that was, I think Vrabel, given the year off and having time to go over things and how things went in Tennessee, I think he was pretty scarred by, what happened to him with the offensive coordinator position, whether it was Matt LaFleur for a year, Arthur Smith for 2, then, they both get head coaching jobs. Then it's Todd Downing for 2 years. That didn't work out. Tim Kelly is promoted. That doesn't work out. They all get fired in Tennessee. Like, I think Mike, given the year off and contemplating things, I think he made it much more of a priority about stability and that somebody was going to be there multiple years. And I think we all can see that that's probably the case with Josh McDaniels. But also the QB development has been huge, about Josh's history, his unquestioned resume. Like, all of it just came together to the point where I think it was obvious to Vrabel that if he was going to get another opportunity, that a guy like Josh McDaniels, I don't know if it would have been Josh at the end of the day. I do think he was very high in his list, but having a guy like Josh McDaniels on that side of the ball was very, very appealing to Mike Vrabel.
I'm not always right, but this one aged like fine wine. I would say so myself. I just looked at it, and I never believed that Robert Kraft would sit down in front of Mike Vrabel and say, Mike, you're hiring Josh McDaniels. I never thought that would ever be uttered by Robert Kraft. Robert has not meddled a ton, right? And I think people look back at the Bill O'Brien Belichick thing. I think that was such a ridiculous situation with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge that Kraft stepped in and said, what the hell are we doing? We've got to get somebody in here that actually has run an offense before. I thought that was extenuating circumstances. I think the Tom Brady, Garoppolo stuff, extenuating circumstances. You're talking about the greatest quarterback of all time. And Robert Kraft will pick his spots when he feels like it's absolutely necessary to step in and say, nope, we got to go a different direction, or we have to choose between this and this. Okay. He has never been a Jerry Jones. He has never been any of these other guys like Tepper in Carolina's first few years, who's just constantly in the weeds, constantly wanting to get involved. People will always look at Jonathan. I don't know how many times we'll hear from people who have reported this stuff and they've been right before. I can look at Burt Breer, who in mid-December, again, I pointed out last podcast, said that McDaniels was right there as far as guys that Vrabel would bring with him to Chicago to run that offense. He said that in the middle of December, well before Mayo was gone. And Bird has also said, like, we have no information that Jonathan Kraft is constantly meddling. That has been put out there. It is a narrative that has zero base to it. It's an opinion. It's an opinion. And so as our guy Felge would say, your guy Felge would say, fact, not opinion. That is opinion, not a fact. And so I'm not surprised by this. Mike Vrabel had all the leverage in the world. He walked into that room as the belle of the ball. And if he didn't get things his way, he could have said easily to Kraft, I'm going to Chicago, or I'm going here, or I'm going there. Because as we heard, that was reported out. Teams circled back with Mike until this became officially official in New England. And they were still interested in Mike Vrabel. If it wasn't Ben Johnson, it was Mike Vrabel at the top of the list. So I just, with all of that leverage, I just don't think Vrabel, Greg, you met Vrabel at the Senior Bowl week practices. Like, there's nothing about Mike Vrabel that would tell you that he would acquiesce and be like, okay, I'm going to let you guys tell me who should run one half, the offensive side of the football. Vrabel's not that.
And it also doesn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of, well, let's just say like the Krafts, pressed a little bit further down on McDaniels and Vrabel was like, okay. But it doesn't make sense from the point, like, all right, say he just did it for a year to see how it works. Like, you're going to change up again on Drake May? Like, that just doesn't make any sense, whatsoever.
Support us and sign up at Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS or download the app today and use code CLNS at prizepicks.com/CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5.